Hello again. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Amy Weiss and Jessica Trubowich. I'll just share a little bit about their backgrounds while they're getting settled. Amy is Director of Refugee and Immigrant Services at Jewish Family and Community Services East Bay, a licensed marriage family therapist with more than 30 years of clinical experience working with children, adults, and families, as well as clinical and program supervision. She has a deep expertise in working with trauma and toxic stress, as well as early childhood mental health and cross-cultural mental health. Amy's done extensive work internationally, teaching and developing programs, and is a seasoned administrator and manager. She serves in JFCS's East Bay's clinical and early childhood programs from 1999 to 2006 and rejoined the agency in 2014 to direct the Refugee and Immigrant Services Department, which focuses on resettling refugees and oversees the LGBTQ Refugee Service Program, which is the only program designed specifically for this population. Jessica Trubowich is Public Policy and Community Building Director at the Jewish Community Relations Council. Jessica has a background in public policy, advocacy, and policymaking through consensus. She's a California native and has been living in the Bay Area for over 10 years, with a BA in political science from UC Santa Barbara and a master's in public policy and administration, and a graduate certificate in collaborative governance from California State University, Sacramento. JCRC's mission is to educate and advocate on issues of vital importance to the organized Jewish community based on consensus, civility, and an expanded commitment to living Jewish values of social justice. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, well done.
I say that to serve as a hand. So if you could both just share with us how you got involved in the work that you do, what compelled you to do this work. Let's start there.
Okay. Hello, everybody. It was very, very touching, by the way, to see this movie. I just want to acknowledge that we can't see you. You can see us. The lights are very bright. So what got me involved with working with refugees and immigrants, I came in as a mental health professional, as a licensed marriage family therapist, and I did a lot of work with trauma and children and families. And at one point in my career, I oversaw the internship training program at JFCS East Bay, working with the Refugee and Immigrant Program, and that was doing clinical mental health intervention with refugees. So that was the way I came into doing this work.
Jessica?
Hi. Well, I would say, I guess I started looking at things and coming to JCRC through looking at a policy angle and interfaith, intergroup relationship building, a desire to really build relationships with other faith and ethnic groups. And I think I've stayed for over 13 years really because of the Jewish piece of it and being able to really impact change through a Jewish lens and using our Jewish values to make change in the world.
Amy, can you, this is better, yeah? Talk a little more about the refugee resettlement aspect of your work and also ways that your work intersects with what's going on at the border and ways it does not.
So JFCS East Bay has been resettling refugees for, basically it's part of our original mission, was to resettle Jewish refugees. And we have a long history of doing that. When the Jewish refugee issue after the Jews from the former Soviet Union became resettled and there was no more Jewish refugees, our agency decided to continue the mission of serving refugees and use our experience as Jews, the Jewish narrative of being refugees, to serve other populations. So we've been doing this work for many, many years. I'd say after the Jews from the former Soviet Union were resettled, we started working with Bosnians, Cambodians, Vietnamese. Right now, we're mostly resettling Afghans who worked for the U.S. Armed Forces in Afghanistan, Iraqis. Our LGBT program is, for those that don't know, folks who are LGBT are criminalized in 74 countries in the world, are killed and hunted, and they have become, they're able to have refugee status only recently, and we were able to get a grant, a small grant to be able to pilot a program about 7 years ago and have been resettling LGBT refugees mostly from Africa. So our resettlement program is one wing of our program, and by the way, I just read on Friday some very, very terrible news that there's a very good chance that the Trump administration is going to stop the program, and which would be just criminal, really, I have to say, because actually the refugee program in the United States was started and based on the Jewish experience after World War II. That's what created the refugee program in the United States. We've been leaders in the world, taken on more refugees than in any other country in the world. And to see it threatened, I mean, it has been threatened for years, but now to see it possibly closed is remarkable, and which means that our doors might become completely closed to refugees, which would create a different issue at the border. You asked about the border. Our agency is involved in providing deportation defense for those living in Contra Costa County who have been picked up by ICE. We provide psychological services to any family who's been separated who are from Contra Costa County. So somebody from the border who has relatives in Contra Costa County or Alameda County might come to our agency through that wing. We're not actively involved much at the border since we're not at the border in our work, but we work closely with JFCS San Diego, who has opened up a shelter and have been working very actively and directly with migrants coming across the border. So we're in a crisis moment. Just want to acknowledge that.
That's really terrible news.
I know. Well, it's not official. I don't want to pour out it's basically the article that came out said it is likely. It was leaked from a meeting, but it is not officially, it hasn't been officially stated from our headquarters highest yet, which is also threatened to close its doors. But anyway, so it's a bad news rumor, and hopefully it's not true.
Okay, we'll hang on to that. In the film synopsis, it's pointed out that Hans's acts of kindness are not motivated out of charity, but out of solidarity. So I'm wondering if both of you could speak to the significance of that and how it relates to your own work. Jessica?
I think much of what we do at JCRC is based in the idea of working in solidarity with the impacted communities. I think when we look at the actions we should take, whether it be the actions, the protests, or the vigils, we're looking at who are the impacted communities, how can we partner with them. When we are doing our advocacy work, we're talking with the communities that are impacted to see what they need out of the situation, what's the best thing for the people who are having the experience. And I think that comes out of a long history of Jews being the impacted community and knowing that what solidarity means is to really stand with, beside the people that are experiencing the trauma at the time.
Yeah, when that was stated in the film, it was very powerful. It was a powerful line, and it resonated with me in terms of the work that we do every single day. We stand up with people. We're not giving, charity implies kind of a power dynamic. And I'd say that our work every single day is in solidarity with those who are experiencing exactly what we have experienced is in our Jewish narrative. It's the original Jewish narrative, Exodus. It's spoken 36 times in the Torah about welcoming the stranger. It's our story. It's who we are. We have an expertise, unfortunately, in this experience, and so it's standing up with people. Our board of directors voted unanimously to sue Donald Trump when the Muslim ban came out. And it was fascinating to be part of that process. It was a telephone call, it was an emergency call for the board, and it was just quickly a unanimous vote to go ahead and do that. So it's a tough time to be in solidarity. It takes courage, and I don't say it just as an agency. We work with hundreds of volunteers. Like, I was so struck by the work of the volunteers in this film, and we couldn't do this work without volunteers. We have 500 volunteers just working with our refugees now, and we have hosted housing arrangements, because obviously people can't come to the Bay Area and afford the rental market. I mean, my own child can't afford to rent a place in the Bay Area, and so it really takes so many different ways of supporting and standing up with refugees. So I just wanted to acknowledge our volunteers.
Can you talk a little bit more about the local response to this national problem? And you've kind of touched on it, but expand.
It's amazing to see, just in the Jewish community alone, the incredible response, the incredible concern. We're seeing synagogues planning actions. We're seeing groups really come together in new ways to address what's happening on the national level. Locally, and what JCRC has been doing, recently we took a trip to the Mexican border with some state legislators to both show them what's going on and to highlight the needs for funding for the shelters that are housing those new migrants that are coming into our country. So we are not powerless here. We have the ability to influence policy, to influence the discussion, the larger policy discussion nationally. I think I know many Jewish groups are reaching out to our interfaith partners, to our community partners and other faith and ethnic groups to come together. There's vigils going on in front of ICE every week that's planned by the Interfaith Coalition for Immigrant Rights. There's action, and people are really trying to bring the attention to it locally.
Can you also tell us about the upcoming action in the mission that's planned?
Yeah, there is a grassroots movement in the mission that has decided that San Francisco needs to make a statement on what's going on. And on September 16th, I believe it's Mexican Independence Day, there's going to be a march planned from the mission to City Hall. There's going to be various actions at the local park in the mission, and there's ways they really need community support. This is organized by community members who have no resources to back this up, but really the spirit and the energy to make it happen. And so I have additional information on this if anyone's interested, but this is going to be an opportunity for, I think, the Jewish community to really show solidarity and march with those people who are so impacted at this time.
Great, thank you. Would both of you share maybe a scene or even a moment in the film that really resonated for you, and tell us a little bit about why?
I mean, there were many moments in the film that resonated with me. Just in particular, in my mind, I was thinking about the difference in the European experience of the refugee crisis versus our experience, because we are, other than at the border with our Central American migrants coming through, we are not impacted by these huge mass movements of people walking across our borders. People have to fly in as refugees. They don't pass the Statue of Liberty like my grandparents did on a boat. And it's striking, the difference. And it was also striking that one scene with the tents, if you remember, the tents, and people set up these it was bare, but it was humane. Families stayed together. There was tea being served. There was information being handed out. They were waiting for the buses to arrive. They was organized. And when I think about what's happening in our country with families being separated, children in cages, being treated inhumanely, it's just a shocking difference, actually. And in Europe, there are many more borders that people have to cross. Exactly. Hungary was closing its borders. Now, I just want to say that this is a global crisis that is beyond what happened after World War II. World War II, if you remember, there was just huge migration going on after the war, and it was something like 45 million refugees across the world. Now we're up to 65 million displaced people, And huge numbers of people are on the move, and we're only at the very beginning of this crisis because of climate change. And people aren't linking that quite yet, but the truth is that if there's a drought, like in Syria, for example, there was the origins of that crisis was actually a terrible drought. And then there was a fight over natural resources, and then a civil war. And now we have 80% of the refugees in the world are Syrian. That's one crisis, one climate change crisis, and we are going to see so many. There needs to be a global response to this crisis rather than just slamming borders closed left and right, which is where we are now.
I think what struck me most in the film was just the general humanity we saw in every scene. And I think that is what's lacking in our policy right now in the United States. And the fact that people can't even get in to that scene where he was holding the baby, the crying baby of a refugee, and and he was taking care of that baby so that the refugee could have some tea. Volunteers aren't even allowed into the detention centers here in the United States. There's no humanity in those detention centers. There's no ability for us as people who are concerned citizens to come in and make a difference. And that's what's really heart-wrenching about seeing the differences between the way in Europe people can really step in and feel that they can make a difference because there's that ability to walk in the door and be human and make those connections. And in the United States, it's really hard to do that.
Can I just chime in? Yes, and in terms of refugees, which we've been welcoming refugees as a country for many, many years, I see the opposite, actually. The remarkable humanity of community, just stepping up. After that little boy from Syria, if you remember a couple years ago, washed up on the shores of Greece, that image changed the nature, people's hearts and minds about refugees, and the phone started ringing off the hook, and we could not even, we had to hire more volunteer coordination because we could not manage how many people wanted to get involved and help. And so now every single synagogue in the Bay Area has stepped up and has coordinated welcome groups for refugees. So we are like a well-oiled welcome machine that is about to get shut down. And the situation with refugees, which has been an ongoing historical function in the United States, is different than the caravans coming to the border. And so it is. But what I really think what's going to happen, this is just my own gut feeling, is if they shut down the refugee program, they're going to take the money from the refugee services and basically work on creating that wall or more militarization at the border, which is very, very disturbing, to say the least.
Well, we're going to open up to questions from the audience in just a moment, but before we do, I would love it if you'd both share what it is that you'd really like people here today to walk out of the theater thinking and potentially doing. What's the action we can take?
I'll start, and I'm sorry, I'm going to give you a bit of a list, because you know what, there is a lot you can do. There is volunteer efforts, there's actions being planned, and I think people should know that whether it's donating to organizations or taking part in a march or volunteering, there's ways that you can make a difference. So let me just start by saying the basics work, and if you write to your member of Congress about this, it's important, and it changes the hearts and minds of elected officials. If you go to our JCRC website, it's very easy to click on a letter to your member of Congress. There are lunchtime vigils every Friday in front of the ICE office in San Francisco that's run by the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity. In Palo Alto, every day there's an organized vigil that's organized by Ben the Ark. On August 4th in San Francisco at Manny's, there's going to be a full day benefit for migrant families. On Tisha B'Av, There's going to be actions in both San Francisco, the East Bay, and Palo Alto, organized by TRUA and organized by the National Council of Jewish Women. Of course, there's the event that I already mentioned, the September 16th action in San Francisco. If you want more information on that, go to the Facebook page of A Day Without Immigrants SF. HIAS has legal service opportunities at the border. HIAS also has volunteer opportunities for congregations at the border, and you can go to their website and see those opportunities. If you're looking for resources, there's United We Dream toolkits and resources on what you can do locally. And then finally, there's large numbers of organizations that are doing amazing work, but I'll name a few if you're interested in making donations. There's the Texas Civil Rights Project South. There's Texas Pro Bono Asylum Representation Project. There's Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley. There's HIAS. There's, of course, our friends at Jewish Family and Children's Services in the East Bay and at Jewish Family Services in San Diego. And finally, locally in San Francisco, there's the Central American Resource Center of San Francisco.
That's a long list.
Long list.
Can we find all of that on the website?
All on our JCRC website, yeah.
So how you can help with JFCS East Bay is locally. We are working with not only refugees, but immigrants as well. And there are many ways you can help. Just this morning, I was at a meeting about a family. The wife, the family is from Pakistan. They arrived within the month. They can't afford rent, of course. Even though he's working 2 jobs, his son is working 2 jobs, they haven't been able to afford the move-in costs for an apartment, which is, they expect 5 times the rent to get in, first-time rent. And we actually, between us and the Mormon Church who are partnering, we still weren't able to come up with the $3,500 that they need to get in. And the wife is on the phone sobbing as I had to leave to come here. So, so one way is to donate money to the Refugee Welcome Fund, which is all about rental subsidies. We have volunteers helping with ESL instruction. There are a zillion ways to volunteer, to take people to doctor's appointments, health appointments, school enrollment, part of a synagogue. We have welcome groups. I think there's a slide also. We have a volunteer coordinator, Catherine Winagura, who can help connect you to any which way that you can support newcomers. So, but there's many other ways to help. But honestly, trying to get into this rental market is so challenging. And it's a place where they want to be. They want to be with their family members, or often they only come because there's a friend or a family member here. And then, of course, there's working with we have a big legal immigration program as well, and our attorneys can certainly use help as well.
Thank you so much. Do we have time for a couple questions?
Yeah, we have time for 1 or 2. So if you have a great question, raise your hand. You're going to have a question house right on the aisle, 3/4 of the way back.
Oh. Thank you. Firstly, the movie was superb. It was extremely moving and inspirational. We all should get involved more than we have. You mentioned that the Mexican-American community is having an event on September 16th. When Trump talked about some of our American congresswomen going back to where they came from, as a Jew, I was appalled, and I felt that the Jewish community of San Francisco and in the United States should march both in Washington and here to show that we will not stand for that kind of language. That is not who our country is. Why has there not been a massive response of American Jews to what Trump said, the racism in his statement?
I think all of us were horrified by what he said, and I think there have been some organizations have responded. I think there are so many horrific statements out there at this time. that I think we're focused on taking action and doing what we can to make things better, to show our solidarity, and we're not just about making statements, we're about truly trying to make change.
I was very touched and moved by the Never Again movement that has just recently taken root or has just been out across the whole country. There are Jewish organizations, young people who are out on the streets. And so I hear your outrage, I experience it with you, as I think most everyone does. You're not alone. And there are ways to plug in immediately. I agree. I think we're at a point in history where why isn't everybody out on the streets every day? Yet we can only do what we can do, each of us.
Another question? I can't see so well, so just let me know if...
Oh, I see someone toward the back right here. All right, house left, far back. This will be our last question.
Some of the things that we've talked about have just happened, so there really wasn't much time, the thing you just, spoke about. But I'm wondering, originally when the Jews came, there had to be some kind of financial support, and so they would go to relatives who would then guarantee they would take care of their financial needs. I don't see any such thing happening now, and I'm wondering, am I missing it? And the other thing is, I'm a teacher who has English second language experience, trying to figure out what I could do. And as you said, it seems kind of closed. Like, I don't think it would be accepted if I wanted to even move down there and do schooling. I have the feeling they'd just say no. So is this in my mind, or would they say no?
There's plenty of opportunities for you to provide services if you're an ESL instructor right here in our community, our local community. We are always looking for ESL instructors. And to respond to your question about the local communities welcoming, it has to do with how organized the communities are who can receive their countrymen or whatever, country people. The Jewish community was very organized after World War II. There were lots of ways that people could be welcomed in, including my own relatives. The people who are coming now, first of all, LGBT refugees have no community. They're fleeing from their communities. They can't go back to the African community or to their own families. They've been rejected. The Afghans who are coming don't have an organized community here. There's no social services that are developed for the Afghan community, for example. It takes time to organize communities and develop infrastructure to support. So they have the mosques, and the mosques do what they can. But it takes us. I mean, we're kind of the community that are welcoming people.
Well, thank you so, so much, Amy and Jessica, for sharing your knowledge and your passion with us. And thank you all for coming. Hope to see you at the next screening.